We screwed up. We cut the posts off, 3 of them. It was exactly 3 out of, at that point in time, we had probably put in 6,000 or 7,000. This is the same job that we tipped over a lift on. Making money as a fence contractor is easy, but you know what's even easier? Losing a couple $100,000. I'm going to tell you about the job we lost the most money on in my entire life.
We did the unthinkable.
Oh, it's thinkable. This was back in the Olson fencing days, and if you want more information about the Olson fencing days, definitely check out Successful Contractor, where we tell you the whole story about Olson fencing and its ultimate demise. So this was Olson fencing, and I'm going to set it up a little bit because you were foreman or what you were doing at this point in time. So the year is 2008, and we had probably the best year that we've ever had in our entire company's lifespan. The reason we had a great year that year is because we actually planned for it, hired a consultant to come in and help us, and that cost us a ton of money, but ultimately they made us a bunch of money. So
cash money.
Coming off of 2008, sitting at a high, made a bunch of money, and then go into 2009 and everybody starts freaking out. Some people were freaking out early 2008, but in Wyoming, the recession really didn't hit us until 2009. So we're going into the beginning of 2009 thinking, how in the world are we going to ever try and match what we did in 2008? And everybody's talking about there's not going to be enough work, but they have the infrastructure package and they do this whole spending bill to help create some projects and stuff. So we're out there bidding work. And what do? We bid work for a customer that we had no business bidding work for because we knew how bad they were to us. And we knew we had never, ever made money on one of their jobs before, but that was not going to stop us from trying. We were going to try again.
It'll be better this time.
So we did the unthinkable and we bid a huge WYDOT job, Wyoming Department of Transportation. So in the fence world, and especially out here in the West, people, the first thing they assume is that, well, do you guys do any of that right-of-way fence that I see along the highways? No, we do not. And the reason we don't is because we have fired that customer for once and for all. We're just not going to work for them.
That stuff will never happen again.
If we don't make money on their jobs, we just don't see eye to eye, and we're better off having separated. We've divorced.
Done.
But before we were smart enough to fire that customer, we decided that was going to be the customer for us that year, and we were going to get this great big job. Job was about 20 some miles of right-of-way fence, not too far from where we live here in Powell. And I think it was just under a $500,000 project, but we were pretty excited. As a contractor, we're like junkies, really. We're trying to go from one high to the next. And the way we get our high is we sell jobs, so a big job gives us a big high. We're always chasing that high. So we're just trying to sell jobs. That's what we do. And then we realize we have to get these jobs done.
You didn't think of that. No.
This is this big job for WYDOT. We're going to make a bunch of money. We, in fact, just to foreshadow a little, we did not make a bunch of money. And you were on the job, right?
I was on the job.
I got my start doing ag fence, and so this is all barbed wire, right-of-way fence, woven wire, stuff like that. That's not typically what we do these days. We can still do it, but it's not our forte. It's not really what we excel at.
Yes.
And even back then, that's not what we did really good at. We were commercial chain link. Industrial commercial stuff is where we kind of found our niche. Niche.
Or
Pronounced gnocchi.
That thing. So you were on that job. Tell us a little bit about what you saw from your side, and then we'll get into the numbers. I wish that I knew exactly how much we lost because there's some opportunity costs there, but the loss was substantial. So go ahead and tell us what it was like being on that project.
Being on that project, it was a nightmare because, your fence style is always changing. You're dealing with multiple landowners, and then you're dealing with WYDOT in that mix as well. So you're dealing with WYDOT and their engineers. The fence style changing, when you're working for WYDOT, the landowner is allowed to pick whatever fence style they want. So you could have wood posts, you could have metal posts, you could have this wire, you could have that wire. They give you a whole bunch of options. You have to pack around all the materials, and then at every landowner, you're probably going to change your fence style. So you had to gear up for the day for all the different fence styles you might be doing that day, and then also trying to remove the fence and put it back in the same day so that way people's livestock weren't getting out. That was one of the biggest things, was trying to get so much done in one day, but also accommodate the landowners so that way that their livestock wasn't getting out on the road. And you still had a secure fence.
So you're tearing fence down, trying to get it put back in the same day. Maybe today we would do better at it. We've got a little bit more knowledge, but I don't know that our plan of attack was as good as it could have been for that. Put some equipment on it, put some guys on it, and let's go. But this is back before the Montana Pounders became big for driving posts. It was back before tracked one-man post pounders were a big thing. There's several things that we could have done.
Our star piece of equipment there was the log cabin driver. Mm-hmm.
And it takes two people, one person in the equipment and one person outside the equipment. So you've got two people, and you got crews going ahead and laying stuff out. You got a crew going ahead of them, tearing stuff out. But WYDOT's just notoriously difficult to work for. Now, it's different in each district, and the district that primarily was in wasn't too bad. That when we moved to the Cody district, that one was terrible. We couldn't make those people happy to save our lives.
Yes.
Inspectors, huh? They're the worst.
They're just out there with a tape measure, and if your post is supposed to be in there 52 inches and you put it in there 52 and a half, that's the kind of stuff. 2 wraps on everything. If they can bust your chops over something, they're going to bust your chops.
I see what you're doing.
A lot of silly things, how many staples have to be on each line wire and how many twists of wire. And I mean, they specify everything out, and we knew that going into it, but some of their stuff's just overboard and it's open to interpretation. And I think at the end of the day, the engineer really made a difference, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I tell you the next WYDOT story, because we aren't done there. In case you thought we learned our lesson there, we in fact did not.
Nope.
I'm not a quick learner.
Oh, you are dumb sometimes.
So on that job, we probably lost a $500,000 job. We probably lost $300,000 pretty easy. The overall loss for that year was somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $300,000, and it was 98% attributed to that one project. We paid them to build all that fence, so I hope all those people on the Grable Shell Highway, as you come across the Bighorns and drop into Grable on your way to Yellowstone, you see that fence. Just know that Olson Fencing, we did all that for no money.
Yeah, we did that. It was a great time.
It was in fact not a great time.
No, it sucked.
I want to be very clear about all this too. Now, WYDOT is a terrible customer for us, but they were allowed to abuse us because I was stupid and I kept going back for more. If you walk through a door and somebody punches you in the face and you're like, ow, that hurt, and then you go walking through the door and you get punched in the face a second time, the first time was kind of like that was your warning.
You didn't learn your lesson, huh?
Was I sure I got punched in the face? Yes.
Yes, indeed,
So
I
fast
did.
forward to 2012. So if you're a fence contractor, anybody, understand that there's a lesson. One of the reasons that we got in trouble on that is because we got super aggressive with our numbers, and we just decided we were going to try and win the jobs at any cost because we need to stay busy. Staying busy is more important. Well, we bid the jobs too low so that we could be so that we could be competitive and try and win them. And that is not a way to do that. We got scared. We would have been better off not having any work and would have lost less money than doing the work that we did like we did. So if there's a tough time, like everybody's surmising right now that we're in tough economic times, you will never ever see me lower my cost. My cost for doing the job hasn't gone down. Why would I lower costs? That's just a way to go out of business faster. So fast forward to 2010, Olson Fencing was struggling, and it was our worst year. We went from doing let's say $3 million a year down to doing $2 million a year.
I just lost $1 million, that's all.
And still trying to cover the same amount of overhead and everything. Early 2012, we're just struggling at this point in time. Coming off of 2008, lost money in 2009, lost money in 2010, lost money in 2011.
At least we're consistent.
2012, it's getting kind of desperate, and we're like, we got to do something. And so there's this great big huge snow fence job that comes up for bid, again with WYDOT, and we're like, this will be different. It's snow fence. It's totally different.
Nope, it wasn't.
If you drive down I-80 and you're going from Cheyenne to, let's say, Salt Lake on your way to California or something, and you see all that great big tall vertical snow fence, we did a bunch of that. Those posts are 19 and a half feet tall, and I think they're all 4x6. So we decided we're going to bid this snow fence job for WYDOT because when you walk through a door and you get punched in the face, you walk through the door a second time to make sure you got punched in the face.
But this time we're going to do it on the cheap.
So we get it again. We're like, we need to stay busy, and we're going to do this, and it's going to be fine. And we just see dollar signs, and we're like, we can figure this out. It's not a big deal. Each one of those posts is 7.5 feet in the ground, and we didn't have anything that could dig 7.5 feet at that point in time. And this is out in some pretty rocky, terrainy area in Wyoming. We're like, no, we got a plan. So we're going to buy a punch truck, and that's the contractor mentality is we'll just buy some equipment and this job will pay for it. Don't ever do that. It's not a good idea. We get this punch truck, and then we get this tractor apparatus that's got a drilling unit on it, and that thing was a raging pile of crap.
Stunningly poor decision making.
Bought that in Iowa, and Carl and I hauled it all the way home. Then we got basically a punch truck and bought that, and both those things we went out there and struggled for like the first month and a half, and we had 11 or 12,000 posts to put in the ground and a very, very tight timeline to get it done in. So we spent the first couple months struggling on that project to even try and figure out how to get it done. Really started coming down to the wire, and we were spending tons of money, and we had crews out of Laramie, and I had another guy trying to run the job basically remotely so that all the other crews that we had up here could keep running. So we're spending money, just all kinds of money trying to get this job going. And they finally get to a point where they're making a little bit of progress, but it's not great. So we finally ultimately come on excavators, and so we start digging all of our holes with big, like 210 excavators, medium-sized track excavators with augers on them, 2-speed augers, and that worked a lot better. So Alan and I go down there, and we're trying to do all this stuff and finally start getting some production. And then we run into the inspector from hell. And the inspector and the resident engineer down there, just, we could not make them happy. So we finally get some progress going, and they were just running us through the ringer. So what they wanted us to do is they wanted us to compact from 7.5 feet down in the ground, we had to compact in 6-inch lifts. You know, there was no testing, there was no compaction testing, there was no scientific method for how well these posts were set other than a guy walking up. He would do two things. He'd shake the post, and if he could get it to wiggle, it wasn't good enough. And then he would, at the very end, put his heel in the ground with his boot, and if he could make a boot impression in the dirt at the top of the post, it needed to be tamped some more. Super scientific stuff.
So scientific.
So we made a mistake and ended up, we had 3 holes, fought tooth and nail trying to get them down, couldn't get them down, and finally just said, you know what, just cut these posts off. And we ended up cutting off about yay much of a post that was going 7.5 feet in the ground. He come by, saw those scraps sitting in the dump trailer that we were hauling around, and was like, you are not doing that. You are not cutting any posts off. Just went ballistic on us. That's when he started doing all these super scientific methods of shaking a post to see if it was tight enough. Now, mind you, that there was a bunch of this fence that was done before we did it. Like, they had not tamped anything. They were not tamping well at all. We were using pneumatic tampers, trying to do the best we could, getting them all the way down the bottom of the hole. Believe it or not, as bad as we installed that fence, it's still standing today. I just want you to know. Before we got to the end of it, this inspector and I, and this is kind of in the bad customer, bad horror stories. So we screwed up. We cut the posts off, 3 of them. It was exactly 3 out of, at that point in time, we had probably put in 6,000 or 7,000. This is the same job that we tipped over a lift on. These posts weighed about 300 pounds a piece, and we had to lift them in with a telescoping forklift, and somebody tipped one over, and we destroyed a forklift on that project.
Well, that's unfortunate.
So I get caught cutting these posts off, and then after that, that inspector just ran us through the ringer and just doing all these crazy things, and we can't make him happy. And so I sent an email to the general contractor that we were working for that was actually providing all the material, because we were doing labor only. And that idiot sent my email that was meant for his eyes only straight on to the engineer with the state. And they didn't like what I had to say because that was not worded for the state to see. And I was like, what in the world is wrong with these guys? They're basically waiting in the lurch, trying to catch us doing stuff. And there's no, I mean, I don't remember. I wish I still had that email today, but he forwarded on. That was not the move. That was not the move. It was meant for his eye only, because us and the general contractor are supposed to be kind of a team, right?
Yep.
Well, he went straight to, I'm going to go on the team of WYDOT. And then from then it was over. We had a meeting at the site because we were really struggling, and they basically were running us through the ringer so we could get no production. And at this point in time, I'm spending $25,000-$30,000 a week just in fuel and guys just trying to keep the project going. We're just digging a red hole. I mean, there's red ink as far as the eye can see on this job, just not making any money. And the only hope we had was to try and get enough production so that we were actually getting somewhere. They ruined that. We can't get any production, and I can see the writing on the wall. We are flat going broke on this job.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
We have this meeting at the job site, and it's clear they team up, and it's the general contractor, it's WYDOT and the inspector and Alan and I, and we get to the job site and we have this meeting. They just basically start laying into us how terrible we are, even though the fact that you could go back and look at the previous snow fence job and it was done exactly the same way. The posts were looser, and you could see settling from the fact that they had not compacted the soil very well at all. And we're making great time. We're doing the best we can, and they just,
no mercy.
At the end, trust me, at the end, it gets even better. So there's a surprise. I finally said, you know what? If I'm going to go broke, it's not going to be on this job fighting for you. I'm going to go make as much money as I can so we can go broke with as much grace as we possibly can, because I could see the writing on the wall. We left that job site, pulled all our equipment off there, and left and never went back.
I think we're done here.
The general contractor begged me to come back, and I said, if you can be the liaison between me and WYDOT, then we'll do it, because I'm never talking to these guys again. We could never come to any agreement. So that's the only job we've ever pulled off of and never went back to. And that is 100% the job job that sank our ship. Maybe we could have pulled it out and not gone broke and ruined the company if it hadn't been for that job. But that was the second time we got punched in the face so hard on that one, we never came back. We got Mike Tyson pretty good on that one.
Mike Tyson hurt.
Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I don't even think my plan was that good, honestly. So we leave the job, and that's why Olson Fencing doesn't exist anymore. Again, that whole story is right up here. I need to go back just a little bit because when we had our pre-construction meeting on that project, they're like, the contractor that was in here last time did such a terrible job. So that basically, they already knew that they were going to watch us like a hawk, and they did not like the contractor that did the previous phases, and they had lots of trouble with them and stuff like that. They already kind of had it out for us because they had a bad experience previous to us, and they told us this. And we're like, we're going to do the best we can. And in the beginning, they're like, oh, you guys are doing great. But then when they caught us cutting those 3 posts off, that was it. I mean, it was over. That was probably the nail in the coffin. That's what ruined everything. So you guys are a terrible contractor. You leave the job, and guess who they got to come back in and finish that job?
The previous contractor.
Same guy.
Why would you go and do that?
Same guy that did all the stuff they hated. And I have no idea how that worked out between them, but they, in fact, did hire him to come back and finish that job. Oh, it's so infuriating. Maybe he did all the same stuff. The only thing they cared about was the depth with him, and somehow he was able to appease them. But all the work that he did before that caused us to have all the problems with them was totally fine again then. If I'm being honest, I think a lot of it was the fact that our age. He was a guy that was seasoned and older and growlier and, just looked more mature just because of his age. And Alan and I, so this is 2012, I would have been 35 and Alan would have been 8 years younger than me. So he's upper 20s. And I just think that they thought they could run over us and they were gonna. So everybody looks at age discrimination and says it only works against old people. But I think that there's a lot of discrimination that goes against people that are young, saying these guys don't know what they're doing and we're just going to beat them up because we can.
Agreed.
But still my fault because I walked right back through that same door with a customer that I knew was terrible and got punched in the face again, and that one KO'd us. So that's the second job. And on that one, yeah, that's another one that's in the couple $100,000 of money we lost on the job. So same customer, 2 different experiences, lost more money on those. On WYDOT alone, I've probably lost in excess of $600,000 because that wasn't the only 2 jobs we did. We've done other jobs for them on a smaller scale and lost money on all of them. Don't think I ever made a single dime on any WYDOT job ever. So when people call me up and they say, hey, would you like to go do a WYDOT job? I would rather have open heart surgery done by my 17-year-old than ever consider going back to do a WYDOT job.
So you'd never go back?
I think that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You never go back. I'll go broke, but it just won't be here.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, I was going to say, if you got one coming up tomorrow, here's my
So if you can beat those stories and if you've lost more money than that on a project, I'd love to hear about it because there's got to be a story. We all have that one story as contractors, one customer in particular, and it's one type of work, and we just don't ever do that stuff ever again. I don't want to talk about it. Okay, I'll talk about it.
It's a good story.
It's a good
The question is, did you learn anything from it?
I like to feel like about the 5th time I finally figured it out, and we have not done a WYDOT job since.
So we actually went ahead and chained that door shut and screwed it so that he can't open that door
Yeah,
again?
Pandora's box is shut forever. We're going to call that Pandora's box.
That thing's gone. It's at the bottom of the ocean. The only way to get that thing back is, well, it's not possible.
It's down there with Ocean's Gate.
Yep.
Buried forever. Love to hear your stories in the comments down below. Hopefully you're not as dumb as me. That's what I hope. I'm Mark with SWI, hanging out with Dan.
I'm Dan with SWI in Wyoming.
And we hope you have a good dang day. And remember that WYDOT is not the answer.